Penn State fans, the Nittany Lions are going to the semis. Johnny McGonigal and Max Ralph here from PennLive for the Blue White Breakdown, and this is another big one. I mean, Penn State just for better or worse, they pretty much throttled Boise State Tuesday night in the Fiesta Bowl. There were obviously some issues offensively that we're going to talk about. That there were it wasn't a perfect game, but from start to finish, it never really felt like Penn State was going to lose that game. There are some issues that we're going to talk about here today, specifically off the top with Abdul Carter, star defensive end, first round draft pick, probably a top 10 pick next year. He got hurt in the early second quarter, if I'm remembering correctly, and did not return to the game. Looked like it was some left side, arm, shoulder, wrist, that area going on. He had a wrap on his arm when he came out of the locker room. We're not really sure at the moment, Johnny, what's next for him. But I think we got maybe a positive update today, if you want to weigh in there.
Totally, yeah, Max. So after the game, and then on New Year's Day, checking in with College Game Day during their broadcast ahead of the Texas-Arizona State game, James Franklin, both opportunities to talk about Abdul Carter, didn't say a whole lot. He did say on College Game Day, and I'm reading. I flipped on College Game Day at the exact right time. By the way, like literally right when he was starting to talk. So that was total coincidence on my part. It's not like I was waiting on bated breath for James to come on, but it just worked out really well. He said Abdul's going to do everything in his power to get back. If he's able to go, I know he'll go. We'll get him checked out, make sure everything's okay. I just saw him walking for breakfast, and he looks great. His attitude is great. And on Thursday morning, Penn State fans who are also Star Wars fans, I know we are both very into the Star Wars franchise. Maybe not Rise of Skywalker, but everything else, has been pretty good.
Johnny, you don't want to get into my sequel takes in this podcast. So
that is an off-season podcast. Like and that would be our longest podcast.
You're probably right.
Yeah. But I'm a huge fan of Rogue One.
Okay.
I think it's a great movie, start to finish. And Abdul Carter on Thursday morning, I'll have to ask him if he's also a Star Wars fan or if someone told him to post this. But he posted just an image with no comment, no nothing, but just a comment or an image of Darth Vader in a Bacta tank, healing. And we know if you've seen Rogue One, it's an image from that movie. You know what happens at the end of that movie when Darth Vader goes on this unstoppable rampage through these poor rebels, just lighting them up with his red lightsaber. So, look, perhaps a sign that a return is coming, that he's healing up and getting ready for the CFP semifinals. Penn State will certainly need him in order to advance to the national championship game. And Max, we don't know who Penn State is playing next. Given the tragedy in New Orleans, early New Year's Day morning, the Sugar Bowl was postponed to Thursday at 4 p.m. We're recording this Thursday morning around 10 a.m. Notre Dame and Georgia still yet to play, and Penn State will play the winner of those two teams in the Orange Bowl in the CFP semifinals. And Penn State would certainly like to have Abdul Carter back for that game.
Yeah, you kind of stole the words out of my mouth there. Like we don't know who they're playing yet, but I will say I think both of those teams will probably universally be considered a step up in competition for Penn State, and specifically Abdul Carter if he gets back on the field, because look, SMU's left tackle situation was not good. Boise State, Cage Casey got a ton of credit for what he did during the season. He's a good player. I think he was a second-team All-American, if I'm remembering correctly. And Abdul, through only one quarter, made him look silly. I mean, that's just my eyes specifically when Penn State was on the defensive side of the ball, watching that game could not be taken away from Abdul because he was absolutely dominating. I worry for Maddox Madsen what that game would have looked like. Mind you, a game where he already threw 3 interceptions, what it would have looked like if Abdul stayed in the game the whole time. I think the Darth Vader trope is a great one for him because if he's on the field, he is terrorizing offenses. He has, ever since about week 3, this year. He just something clicked, and it's been crazy. I mean, he was huge in helping stop Genty against Boise State too. Like he was really good for a quarter of play. I do, in this time, I want to give some credit though to deny Dennis Sutton, who is always kind of the second fiddle to Abdul, but he played really well against Boise State, and really beyond him, you kind of expect Deny to play well, but Amin Vanover is a guy who just I thought maybe probably played the best game of his career. I mean, he's been here for 5 years and played the best game of his career against Boise State when Penn State needed it most. I mean, that sack he had of Madsen in the fourth quarter when they were going in to score, it was like a 10-yard loss. He chased Madsen down from behind. That's probably the best play he's made in his life. I mean, like if we're being honest, and that's not a diss to Amin by any measure. That was a huge play that completely stopped momentum for Boise State in a chance when a game that was not close all day could have suddenly become close. And he made that play. He had a career high in tackles with 6 of them, 2.5 tackles for loss, and just really good play from him. I thought it was interesting. We saw some Max Granville in third down packages, which is kind of what I would have expected for his role to be down the stretch, is just to get him in those rushing situations, because that's what he does well. I mean, he's still supposed to be a senior in high school, and he's really savvy at getting to the quarterback. He's got great moves up front. Maybe he just doesn't have the size quite yet to defend the run at an elite level. So they get him in there on passing downs. Now, when I say he doesn't have the size, like that's he's huge for being 18 years old, but it's a good way to use him. I thought it was effective, and really, Amin Vanover, Smith Vilbert, Max Granville, all deserve a ton of credit for what they did in the wake of Abdul's injury against Boise State. Johnny, just one thing I want to hit on really quickly. You mentioned that we don't know who Penn State is playing yet. It's hard for me to sit here right now and say which team I'd rather Penn State play. Like if I was Penn State, which team I would rather play, because I really think that I think they're both really good teams. Is honestly the bottom line. I guess at this point, I'd probably lean toward Georgia because there's some quarterback uncertainty. But Gunnar Stockton could go out tonight and play a great game, and then all of a sudden I'm saying, well, I don't want to see Georgia's defense. There's a lot of ways this could go. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about that game, considering it'll probably be decided by the time a lot of Penn State fans listen to this podcast. But I just wanted to put that thought out there.
Totally. Yeah, no, I mean, that's been a discussion ever since Penn State, got a commanding lead over Boise State, on New Year's Eve. Fans were talking like, who would you rather play? And it's a total fair discussion, and one that's going to be ongoing, really even through, the Sugar Bowl while those two teams, Georgia and Notre Dame, suit up. I also lean, I think I lean Georgia just because like Notre Dame, the way that they're constructed, run first with Jeremiah Love and even their quarterback, Riley Leonard, like he doesn't air it out. They don't have an explosive passing game, but like that could limit the effect that Abdul Carter could possibly have as a pass rusher and everything else in terms of the blitz packages and what Penn State likes to do on defense. I also wouldn't want to, have to coach against Kirby Smart in a game that, decides who goes to the national title game. I mean, that guy's been there, done that. So whichever team Penn State faces, like you mentioned, Max, it's going to be a step up in competition for Abdul and everyone else on that team and on that coaching staff. I'm not saying Penn State has had an easy road by any means, but they've had a more manageable road to the CFP semifinals than Ohio State did in beating really smoking Oregon
And Tennessee.
and Tennessee. I guess you could argue Texas with Clemson in the first round, Clemson barely getting into the field, and then needing 2 overtimes though to beat Arizona State. Cam Scatabo and the boys. I mean, they that was a hell of a game. That was a hell of a comeback.
It was great. That was so much fun. Malik McClain, shout out.
Malik McClain, shout out. Yeah, I didn't have it on the bingo card that we would. We decided we were going to do this podcast this morning. We decided like yesterday. All right, we're going to record on Thursday morning. I didn't think that we would mention Malik McClain before we mentioned Drew Allar or Nick Singleton or Katron Allen, but we did. Malik McClain, shout out him. former Penn State wide receiver, transfers to Arizona State, makes a big play in that game and helps Arizona State come back. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was a hell of a game. Not as much of a hell of a game in the Rose Bowl. Oregon got their doors blown off. Ohio State, my pick for them winning the national title is looking better and better
It really
um,
is.
as it goes. But maybe we will get that Ohio State Penn State matchup in the national title game. First, Penn State has to get by Georgia or Notre Dame, and how they got to this point though, Max, by beating Boise State. We mentioned that there were positives and negatives from that game, and of course, like they made it to the CFP semifinals, so celebrate that, Penn State fans. But
Mm.
it's also fair to nitpick and look at some both positives and negatives when it came to that game. Max, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with Katron Allen and Nick Singleton imposing their will, specifically Katron, or do you want to start with Drew and the ups and downs that he had?
Johnny, I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna let you take it away with Drew
Okay.
because you're the man who's talked to Dane Brugler about him, and I know Dane had some stuff to say on Tuesday night with what Allar was doing. You wrote a really good column about Drew. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out on PennLive. Very very well thought out and great examples of what Drew did during that game. But the bottom line is, before I turn it over to you, like he was number one overall pick potential through one quarter in that game. And then it just kind of like, and then you realize why he's coming back. So Johnny, take it away.
Yeah, so basically, when I was watching that game and Drew's performance in the first quarter, he's going off, right? That first drive, the touchdown throw to Tyler Warren was spectacular. Really, only where Tyler could get it in the back corner of the end zone to toe tap that in for Penn State's first touchdown. And then the following drive, he's a perfectly weighted and with all the touch and the arm strength you would want, that deep ball to Amari Evans and everyone watching that game, right? Because it was the only game on. It's New Year's Eve. There's still a few more hours to the ball drop. So anyone who's a college football or football fan in general is watching that game, and everyone was impressed with Drew Allar in that first quarter enough that people are tweeting and posting like, why is this kid waiting until 2026 again? Like why isn't he coming out for this upcoming draft? And Dane Brugler, who I like you mentioned, I spoke to a couple weeks ago after Drew made the decision and the announcement that he intends to come back for next season. I talked to Dane, who is the NFL draft analyst, a really well sourced and knowledgeable guy who works for the Athletic, about Drew as a prospect. And he basically told me the positives and negatives, right? The tools, the talent are there. He could use another year to develop. But Dane, while that first quarter performance was going on, tweeted that there are several NFL GMs who believe Allar could enter the 2025 NFL draft with a strong playoff run. Teams are still heavily scouting him for the 2025 class, a class that is a weak quarterback class this year. It's
Mm-hmm.
really Cam Ward from Miami, Colorado, Shadur Sanders, and then a whole lot of uncertainty. And so there's this like, hey, if Drew leads Penn State to, say they win the CFP semifinals, maybe they win the national title. Like, could he decide to, go back on that intention and leave for the NFL draft? It was always a possibility, and we discussed it really on the podcast right after Drew's decision and
Yeah.
Bo's decision to transfer. That if they went on a memorable run in the CFP final, in the CFP, and Drew's the reason why that he could leave. But after that first quarter, we saw why, James Franklin said that there's excitement that there's still development to be done and, growth to be had.
Yeah.
Because he missed a wide open Tyler Warren over the middle. He threw into double coverage a couple times downfield that should have been picks or offensive passes, interference. So he showed those highs and lows, those moments of brilliance and then moments of frustration. For fans watching. I think a lot of the frustration was probably that they weren't running the ball as much as they should have at that point. But that Drew Allar is capable of being QB1
Mm-hmm.
in the 2026 NFL draft. But look, unless he goes and lights up Georgia or Notre Dame, and then say Oregon or Ohio State or Texas, and really puts a stamp on himself and shows that he has no flaws in those two games. I think he would make the right decision in coming back for next season to continue to improve and develop and fine tune his skills. Sorry, that was long winded, but I
No,
hope
it's perfect, and it's a great encapsulation of what the situation is with Drew, and I think maybe a good way to contextualize it is look at what he did last year in his first year as the starter at quarterback, and there were a lot of issues. Like he teased that arm talent a little bit, but the decision making wasn't there. Like he was not thinking quickly enough in the pocket. He wasn't running like he was this year. And how much of that can you say is Mike Yurcich? Probably a fair bit, but like there was exponential growth in year one to year two. If he can even grow like 25% more next year than what he did like between these 2 years, we really are talking about a guy who probably could or should be the number one overall pick next year, just because of the fact that he is 6'5", 240 pounds, can throw the ball 60 yards on a dime. Like there are just so many things that just like make NFL GMs like drool for Drew Aller. Like there are things that he's got to clean up, and that is absolutely fact. Um, but I trust that he can do it next year. Like I've just been continually impressed by Drew, especially there was a noticeable change this year too. Like even just in the way he spoke to us as media. Like he grew up this year, and it was clearly noticeable in a lot of different ways, not just his play. And you look at the way that he's like screaming and yelling on the sideline when things don't go right. And it's not like he's screaming and yelling at teammates, but he's like mad at himself. He's just mad at the situation because he knows that he can do better. He knows what should be happening. He's in control. And those are the types of things that we needed to see from him growth wise this year. And next year, if he can put together a few more of the actual physical tools with his footwork in the pocket and that kind of stuff, I really like the sky really is the limit for him. There's a reason he was the number one quarterback coming out of high school for stuff like that. But you talk, Johnny. You made a mention of maybe they should have been running the ball a little bit more when Drew went downhill a little bit. I'm. It's hard to say because like you can put everything in a vacuum. Boise State was blitzing the heck out of them, and that's part of why some of the run fits weren't as successful. But when they got in the right look, they were absolutely crushing Boise State on the ground. I took a look at all of their third downs based on stat broadcasts yesterday. Today, my plan is to go back and watch all the third downs and then write about it for Friday morning. So if you're interested, go and check that out. But the only thing that I have to say, 3 times they had 3rd and 6 or less and passed. They didn't get any of them. That's kind of there are other short third down situations where they ran the ball and got it. There's longer third down situations where they passed and got it. But again, like third down's kind of been an issue for Penn State this year. I don't have their national rank off the top of my head, but against Boise State, they were only 38%, which is not good. They're not good in the biggest games this season. They've struggled on third down. Ohio State and Oregon both were not good performances. But I think there's argument that Penn State should have ran the ball more. I mean, I think we were watching Ohio State, and Johnny, you tweeted about it. Staples easy button, throw the ball to Jeremiah Smith. Well, against Boise State, I think that Andy Kotelnicki's Staples easy button was Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, and you kind of saw it when Singleton broke that long run to end the game for 58 yards. It's like just put the ball on the ground. Like I think that there were times where he needed to go back to it, but all in all, I think you have to remain impressed, as we said we were going to be. Heading into the game, this run game is just on fire.
Yeah, it was one of those, Max, where we're talking about Drew Aller, right? So he started the game 10 of 13 for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns, lighten it up. He attempted 12 more passes after that, and 9 of them fell incomplete.
Yeah.
Now, there were a drop or two in there,
Mhm.
some iffiness there, whether or not you want to assign drops or not. But it felt like they were trying to make a point, they being Andy Kotelnicki, and then of course James Franklin is involved in play, in game planning and the entire offensive staff. That it felt like they were trying to make a point in the
Mhm.
passing game when they didn't need to. Now, maybe if they're asked about it and they gave them truth serum, maybe they thought like, hey, we're going to take our shots, and we obviously like our matchups against the secondary, but
Yeah.
also we want to establish even more confidence, for the passing game moving forward in the playoff.
Mhm.
But at the time, like the game was, I thought Penn State had control of that game from the jump. And at
Mhm.
no point did I think that they were going to lose, even though it was a one-score game, for a time there. But it was a one-score game, and they're still throwing it like the third and one to open the third quarter.
Mhm.
They go play action pass. I'm like, what? What are they doing? Like, run the ball. Katron Allen, you mentioned it, Max. I thought
Mhm.
he had maybe his best performance in a Penn State uniform in his career. I
That's
mean,
very
he's had some good
possible.
ones. He's had some good ones, but I mean, you look at even the best run of the night was one that didn't count. It was the
Yeah.
holding call.
It was a
Um,
weak holding too. Like
it
I'm
was a
I'm
bit of
gonna
yeah. He got around him a little bit, but it was ticky tack, right? Like those refs were flag happy.
They were 23 flags in the game because I'm throwing together a stats post, like the stats that showed up, and I was about to write like Penn State had 10 penalties for 98 yards, like they still have issues with penalties, and then I go and look, and I'm like, well, they're actually not that bad. They're like 30th in the country with like 5 penalties a game. And then I looked and I'm like, no, you know what? There were just 23 flags in this game. I don't think that this is representative of anything.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it's just ridiculous. But yeah,
It
no,
was
to continue your point on Katron,
no,
that
no.
run
It
was
was
absurd.
I'm glad you brought that up because it was a little ridiculous. Well, so a holding call wipes out a just marauding run, through Boise State's defense by Katron Allen, and he was doing it all night. He
Mhm.
was doing it all night, and Nick, he finally pops the long one at the end to ice the game, seal the win, 58-yard touchdown that felt like it was coming.
Yeah.
Throughout that game, he got tripped up here and there. I know Boise's run defense and the way that they kind of work things, they were kind of messing with his eyes, I think, a little bit,
Mhm.
and doing a good job there. Like, credit to Boise's defense because I think for the most part they did well.
Yeah.
Specifically, their blitz packages were
Yeah.
confusing Penn State's interior offensive line, the twists, the delays, the stunts. Penn State, that's something that has to be cleaned up because for as well as Boise ranks nationally in tackles for loss and sacks, like if you're going up against Notre Dame's defensive line or Georgia's defensive line that has like first round picks all over the place on that defense, like that's a problem. So
Mhm.
something to clean up there moving forward for Penn State. But the running game, which has been a bread and butter for Penn State, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen now both over 1,000 yards rushing for the season. One of only two teams in the country with two backs over 800 yards rushing, along with Ohio State, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Like, that is the bread and butter of this offense. For as good as Drew Allar is and for as good as Tyler Warren is, when they're able to establish the point of attack in the run game and get downhill with Katron and Nick, like that's going to be impossible for a Boise State or an SMU to stop. And I'm really intrigued to see, how it does against a Georgia and a Notre Dame.
Yeah. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen both went over 1,000 yards for the season in that game. They're the first Penn State duo ever to do it, which is kind of surprising, I guess. I mean, if you really like rack the brain and think about times when they had two really good running backs at the same time, I guess it's not shocking, but it's just like Penn State's been playing football for so long. So it's
Yeah,
crazy to see.
this was their 15th game. So yeah.
Right. Right. It's interesting, first time two teammates have done it. First time in the Big Ten in 9 years, I think. 2016, Iowa duo Akram Wadley and LaShun Williams both did it. But yeah, they're on another level right now. I do think the 4 sacks that Penn State gave up against Boise State is an issue. You mentioned it, but their defense was really impressive. I think they just got out athleted. Like if that makes sense, it's not a word, but I think truthfully they just got out athleted in that game. Had really good schemes. There's going to be some adjustments to be made, heading into this next game. But I think Johnny, to kind of wrap this up here, I think you and I kind of feel the same way, and we talked about it when we like previewed the bracket as soon as it came out. This is where Penn State was supposed to be. Like they were supposed to win both of those games, win them fairly handedly, but you continue to have to appreciate that that's actually what happened. Like James Franklin does not lose games he's not supposed to lose. Like you have to give the man credit for that. It's just like it's rinse and repeat. It really is. Like the last one that I can remember in my mind that was egregious was the Illinois game, in when Sean Clifford was hurt in 9 overtimes. Like they just don't lose games they're supposed to lose, and it continues in the college football playoff. This is where they're supposed to be, They were supposed to win those games, but that doesn't take anything away from the fact that they are here. In my argument, Johnny, that I know you and I have talked about a little bit, that I kind of want to get on my soapbox for a second, is that like this season is officially a success. Like I don't care what happens in the national semifinal. Like this season's a success. Coming into the year, we talked about how Penn State had to make the playoff in the first year of the 12 team, and they did. They made it. Not only did they make it, they're in the national semifinal. And sure, you can make comments about the teams that they played, but like I said, they don't lose those games, and they won both of them by multiple scores. Like there are just so many ways that you look at this. It is a win of a season. Look at James Franklin immediately after the Ohio State loss. He, like a lot of other people, thought that this could have finally been the year when Penn State could take Ohio State, and for good reason. I mean, you saw what that offense did against Oregon, and Penn State held them to 20 points. Like they were in that game. It came down to a goal line stand where Andy Kotelnicki probably had his worst play calling of the season. Like this is Penn State had its chance there, and James Franklin stood on the field for like what felt like an hour after the loss because he couldn't believe it. He walked into the media room and he said, "I had all this planned out heading into the day. What I was going to say to you guys, like he was ready to like plant his flag proverbially. You like that one? To plant his flag and like say we've arrived. Penn State is elite once again. Like this is our team." And he's not even gonna admit that he was ready to say that if he doesn't know what he has in a team. Like we've talked a lot. James Franklin is subtle to us as media, but if you parse through what he says and you think about the reasoning behind why he says things, you can figure things out about this Penn State team. That was one of those moments where he talked about, we coach all offseason to win this game against Ohio State. He literally said, everyone who is in my coach's office is hired to beat Ohio State. And I'm telling you right now, he doesn't say those kinds of things if he doesn't think he has a team that is capable of going a long way. They made the Big Ten championship, backdoored their way into it, proved they belonged against the number one team in the nation. Yeah, whatever. They got smoked by Ohio State, but Oregon was a really good football team. Penn State took care of business against SMU and Boise State, and they're one win away from the national championship. Like there is, like I'm confident in saying I don't care if they lose by 30 against Georgia or Notre Dame. The season is a win. James Franklin deserves a hell of a lot of credit for what he's done this year. And I'm not the kind of guy that wants to just go to bat for somebody because you've beaten two, lower level teams or because you've had a good regular season. Like they had a easier schedule in the Big Ten. They didn't have to play Michigan, but like they've done it thoroughly. They have crushed lower competition. And they've gotten to the point where James Franklin knew they could. And I don't think it's over for them yet, but like I categorize this as a huge win for Penn State this year.
I agree with probably 99% of what you said. The 1% being is if they go out and lay a stinker and lose by like 3-4 touchdowns in the CFP semifinals, I think the big game James narrative, is this program really here narrative, like fair or not, that's going to fester throughout the offseason and be a conversation.
Yeah.
But I don't think that happens because I agree with you. I do think that this team was ranked in the top 4 coming into the CFP.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they landed the number 6 seed because of the way the 12-team playoff format is currently constructed. If it was constructed in the way that both you and I think it should be constructed, in that, conference champions, the top 5 ranked conference champions get an automatic bid, but not necessarily the first round bye, Penn State would have been that last team to get a first round bye. So if you're talking about a team that, if you were talking about this team before the season, which by the way, before the season, like the goal was to make the playoff.
Right.
Goal was to make the playoff, and I got on my soapbox a month ago or whatever it was that expectations can change, and they certainly have. And as we potted coming into the playoff, the expectation both of us had was that this team should make the semifinal, and now they're here. And so I agree with you that the season is a success, even if they lose to Georgia or Notre Dame. To finish, what it would be 13-3, right? With 2 CFP wins.
Yeah.
Making it to the Big Ten championship, everything else that that this team has been able to accomplish this year and overcome USC, Wisconsin, Minnesota, like
Mhm.
all those moments. Those there are past Penn State teams that don't get those games in
Correct.
the bag and win, and it shows what kind of talent, what kind of team this Penn State group is, and what they have in that locker room. And James Franklin deserves a lot of credit for that because he's the CEO, man. He's the one he's pulling all the strings. And to just write off this season if they lose would be, I think, a mistake and would
Yeah.
be a bit foolish.
Yeah.
They can't lose by 30,
No,
but
that's fair.
I agree with you. I agree with your point. I agree with your the column you wrote, Max. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I think all right, fair point. If they lose by 30, it's a question mark. Big game James is definitely still a problem. But on that same strain, you mentioned the comebacks against Wisconsin, USC, and specifically Minnesota is the one that I go back to. There are past James Franklins, not just Penn States. There are past James Franklins that don't win those games. Like he's not going out there and calling that fake punt 3 years ago. Like he's
God,
just not. I think he's grown, and I think that that's a product of everything that he said after the Ohio State game. Well, like he knows what this team has, and he knows that he is part of the reason why Penn State hasn't gotten over the hump all these years. And I think he's ready to buck that trend. I mean, he went for a 4th and 1 on his own 19-yard line against SMU. Was that the number? Like, he's
yep.
not doing that in past years. I think James Franklin deserves a lot of credit this year. I'm curious to see what happens in the next week. I think that Boise State game was mostly encouraging for Penn State. There's some things with Drew in the passing offense. Abdul's got to get healthy, but really, you gotta if you are a Penn State fan, like you gotta enjoy where this team is at right now. Like take it in stride. They're playing in a national semifinal. Like for all the years for the 10 years of the 14 playoff, Penn State is in that right now. And I'm doing air quotes if you're not watching YouTube and you're on Spotify or whatever. I'm doing air quotes. Penn State is in the old playoff right now. They're in the top 4, and like that's all you can ask for. Like that's really all you can ask for is a chance to get here. James Franklin's giving it to him. This team's good enough to compete. I I I think it's possible. It's on the table, and it's really impressive.
This team is good enough to win a national title.
Yeah.
Like this team, and we said it before. Like, I mean, my pick was for them to make it there, right? Like,
Mhm.
this team is good enough from Drew Allar, Tyler Warren, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Abdul Carter. Darth Vader Abdul Carter would
Darth
be
Vader, Abdul Carter.
would be a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I hope he continues this trend, by the way, of just using Star Wars, gifs and images to, express himself.
Yeah.
That it would be great.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, this team, this group is special. Cherish it, enjoy it. We've got a week now until the Orange Bowl, until the CFP semifinals, and Max, I know we're very much looking forward to being down there in Miami at Hard Rock Stadium for that game, along with
Mhm.
Bob Flounders and Joe Hermit. The whole PennLive crew will be on hand for the national semifinal. Penn State is in a national semifinal,
Yeah.
and that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool,
Yeah.
man.
It's not words that I would have guessed we were saying heading into the season, but this team's proved a lot of people wrong this year. Given me confidence in them that they belong here, and I mean they do. They're here. That's the bottom line. I'm hoping if Abdul, like if he starts to get cleared, like maybe he'll. I love Star Wars. Would be totally cool with more references. I think a Thanos putting the fifth stone in the glove would be pretty good too. But then again, James Franklin has already said he doesn't like when his guys go on social media. But um,
What are you going to tell Abdul Carter, your future top 5 pick? I think he has carte blanche. But yeah, the if he gets cleared or whatever, and he puts the final stone in,
yeah,
the only thing that would make sense, Max, is if they win the whole thing, that he then tweets the Thanos gif of resting on a grateful universe,
that's
just at
true.
at his farm and just
I,
chilling.
I was also thinking the One Ring to rule them all if they win it all.
There you
There's a lot of I'm a nerd, so enjoy it, Penn State fans. But we'll
go.
see
Yeah.
you in Miami. I think we hit on everything. We kind of rambled for a long time, but this team is doing really well. A lot of things to clean up, but enjoy this, and hope you enjoyed this blue white breakdown. We'll see you all around.